Hi, guys. Welcome to Synchromystic, episode number 17. I'm Wayne McCroy. This is Richard Willett. Together, we're going to tackle the things going on in the world today and their relationship to some dark occultic ties in this world, and the ways in which things are being steered and maneuvered by that small elitist power structure in control in this place that want to implement certain policies in this world. And we see all kinds of different machinations going on in the greater zeitgeist with all of this. So, how are you today, Richard? Always good to speak to you, my friend.
I'm good, thank you. Looking forward to this one. I've been getting more into these kind of subjects these last few weeks. Went through the AI stage of looking into a lot of that the last couple of months. Kind of gone from looking into the religious stuff, which I've kind of got to the point now where I can see where it all comes in, and then going into the more conscious based stuff without going new agey on it. And it's fascinating to me to look at things like the seven lower high laws and see that that's the rainbow, and the rainbow is the visual light spectrum, and we're trapped beneath the light rainbow, and that's like tiny percentage of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then you go out there, so how kind of science kind of backs up conspiracy theories eventually. And I just find that fascinating. So this today we're going to talk about how they are or have already, if the Gnostics were right, but we don't know, hijacked the seat of consciousness, or conscience. And we're going to talk about that. Well, Wayne, I'll let you jump right in because you're always the master of the wisdom with this stuff, and I can chirp in now and again.
All right. Well, I do appreciate you drawing the distinction to the Noahide laws and the seven different colors of the rainbow. And this is an important concept that crosses the bounds across all these different occult teachings. It has to do with what they call these rays of influence that come from the sun and from other places as well that permeate this world. That's what the color spectrum really represents. But there are different types of radiations that go beyond just those colors that we can see, that spectrum of the electromagnetic frequency range that we can see and detect. So there's a lot of different ideas bound up in that, and that is certainly an important aspect to the occultists. So you have these prismatic rays, these different color distinctions being made, and each one is said to have a different type of energetic imprint to it. And all of these things always seem to cross the bounds of a lot of different philosophical ways of thinking. You'll notice the number seven is very prevalent in a lot of different things. It ties back to alchemy, it ties back to Hermeticism, ties back through Rosicrucianism. That's one of the primary conduits in the Western world today that we see the influence of a lot of these things is through the Rosicrucian aspect of it. So these are energetic principles that come from essentially the sky, and they have real world effects here on Earth. Now, this is something that is understood by many of those. I think we're getting some reverb on your mic there, Richard.
I think
It's
I just banged it with my hand. Sorry.
that's okay. Um, so you have these different rays. They represent different energetic influences that can affect us here on Earth from what they would call space. So this crosses into a lot of different ways of thinking. Now, this elitist power structure in this world, these dark occultists who run things at the very tippy top of this power structure in this world, they understand some of the effects of these different prismatic rays and how they influence behavior here on Earth. And this crosses the bounds into what is primarily known as astrology as well. So we've been taught in modern culture to think of astrology as nothing but nonsense. But when you realize, yes, there are actual energetic influences that can affect things here on Earth that come to us from the sky or from space, then you begin to realize that if you understand the machinations of this or the different influences that these things can have, you could manipulate them. And that's what the controllers of this world have done. And they've taught us to really disregard all of that and think of it as nonsense. But look at it this way: even our modern science will acknowledge that things like neutrinos or gamma ray bursts and stuff like that can affect things on Earth. Even the tides are affected by the moon, according to them. So it stands to reason to really connect the dots and say that yes, objects from the sky or from in space can have some type of an energetic influence here on Earth. So this really is where we're at in Western culture. They've kind of programmed us to disregard that, think of things like the notions of astrology as being silly or nonsensical, but it's demonstrable that these influences can affect things here on Earth, especially human behavior. Talk to anybody who's ever worked in an emergency room in an ER. They'll tell you when it's a full moon, oh, we're going to be busy tonight. What do you think about that, Richard?
I think it's absolutely fascinating. It makes total sense. If we are beings, electromagnetic beings, our bodies, a lot of it is water, but in terms of our consciousness, it's all a system within itself. One thing would affect the other. I think the sympathetic resonance in that way was in terms of sympathetic magic is a video I did recently, which I really enjoyed looking into. Is if something looks like, sounds like, which I got from yourself, something else, it will affect that original thing, which then got me into looking at the Gnostic concept of this being a hacked fake copy of the real copy. And then does this, what we do here, affect the real copy? And I'm not saying any of that's true. It's just fascinating to look into these subjects. And I think we do get this information into us, these ideas, these concepts come into us to understand as much as we ever could the world around us, and we're all connected. And I know you have a different view on quantum physics, and I'd love to hear your kind of understanding of the way of when it's viewed it changes. There's a name for it, I forgot it, totally forgot it. What's that called, when you view something and it changes the,
The
it know,
perspective?
yeah, no, it knows that you're viewing it, so it's aware
Oh,
of you
okay.
being a,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know what you're talking about. You're speaking of a particular quantum experiment wherein it's called the double slit experiment,
that's it,
where
yeah, that's the one.
it's if you, the very act of you observing something changes
That's it.
that thing. So this is something that's observed in quantum science. Now, here's the thing with quantum science. Although I disagree with the prospect that they've put together with it, trying to equate everything down to a fundamental particle, the things they're describing are accurate, but our understanding of physics in the modern era in Western culture here, the one we've been handed, we have been misled in how this stuff all operates on a fundamental level. And to understand better how these things truly operate, you have to get back to some of the older sciences, the occult sciences, the alchemical sciences, the hermetic sciences, these things that were known in the past and the ways in which they were taught. There's a level to it that steps outside the bounds of just mere material physicality here.
Mhm.
There are different layers of reality that cause manifestation here in the physical. And this is all about the different vehicles of man. This is wherein we're going to get to tie in the connections here to the seat of consciousness, as we were talking about, and what that is. There are various planes of existence, for lack of better terms, that are all interrelated and interpenetrated with one another. Now, there are those at the highest, most levels of the power structure of this world that are aware of this, because this falls back to some of the old occult sciences. They know this, they know how to manipulate it, and they know the real causations of things primarily start in the spirit world, in these different spiritual worlds, these different planes of existence, before they step down into the physical material world here. So, this is something that they have been attempting to hijack for quite some time now. And they are building wholly synthetic systems to achieve this goal. It goes beyond just re engineering mankind through digital technologies. They want to rewire the entire reality, for lack of better terminology here. So, what they're attempting to do is they are attempting to build a synthetic etheric layer of this reality. And that's what this whole digital realm is going to be. That's what this whole metaverse idea encapsulates. The Web 3.0 technologies, they're going to build a subplane of the physical material plane here that is a digital overlay of that. and they're going to do the same thing with human beings. They want to attach your mental capacities, your brain, your physical brain, everything that happens in your physical brain, they want to attach that to an artificial external digital neocortex. This is one of the promises of transhumanism. So this would tie you into that synthetic etheric layer. Now, to better understand this, maybe we should explain a little bit of cosmology from the old systems that they understand that most people have really been indoctrinated into not even considering today. A lot of this stuff has long been hidden by the secret schools and by those people in positions of power in this world, this secret priest class that operates behind the scenes here that steers and directs all these different things. So, what they've kept hidden is much of this cosmology. And I know I've said it here in the past, and I will repeat it again. I think an important overview of this is given in Max Heindel's The Rosicrucian Cosmoconception, because this is a book that really outlines these things in a fairly understandable way. It will take many readings through that book for people to grasp some of the basic points if you're not familiar in a lot of these occult types of ways of thinking. So that is an important read. And I see, Richard, you just had a copy of it up there. This is a good foundation to start with. So, how far have you gotten into that, and what things have you really looked at with it so far?
With everything that's been going on, it's a real one you've got to see. I mean, you can't understand this stuff over like, I can't say I fully understand it. I get the concepts of it because they're very similar to other concepts in terms of layers and worlds upon worlds. And I call them olive skins because in animation you use an olive skin to put world upon a world to make it look like it's moving and animated. So I get the concept of it. It's very detailed in its concept, but the concept of it is actually just pretty much very similar to many others. It's a layered concept of worlds within worlds, but everyone's sharing the same space, but there's different frequencies within those spaces. So I absolutely, I mean, I find it fascinating. This is the way they teach it as well. But there's other versions of it that is very very similar to things like the Gnostics, very similar things like the Kabbalah. They're very much built on the almost like the same, not so much the same model, although that's there. I would say on the same spirit, the same feel. There's a
The same
feel to
foundation.
same foundations. There's obviously something there, and I believe that shows if we've got this same thing popping up all over the place. There's a foundation of truth to this. I do believe that if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, that's a tiny point of where we are in the infinite reality of we don't really understand. And then within that, the visible light spectrum, which is the seven Noahide laws, it's the rainbow. And there's things called forbidden colors as well outside that, which are the colors between the colors that we aren't able to see. So there are worlds around us. It's quite clear, and I do believe that these royals bloodlines, these the hybrid bloodlines, I still believe they are able to, because their DNA is different, tap into realities around us, beings around us that we would say live in the shadows, but they're only shadows because our eyesight or our foresight or our perception has been completely narrowed. I think at one point we could see these things, and now they hide from us. And they went into the shadows, but it's not the shadows. They just dialed us down. And I think we've exposed about this. So around us all the time, all of these other worlds and possibilities are happening. I think these bloodlines have the technology now to tap into that. I think they have the DNA to tap in that. They have done for thousands of years. I think this is where it goes back to the dual bloodlines. And I think now they have that's what the satanic rituals did for them. It allowed these beings in. And I think it's the same beings that have been there for thousands of years that they're allowing. They're just using technology now. And that's where I kind of is. So that system is incredible to understand, but the fundamental kind of feel of it is that there are worlds around us that we are lower, been dialed down to one of the most basic material worlds. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing because I don't agree with good and bad. Bad, like in terms of Plato didn't say it was bad or evil. He just said it was just different than. So this is more solid, vibrates at a much lower level. I believe in all of that. I completely believe that. And when we leave this body, we're vibrating in a different level. This body is trapped. I don't feel trapped in a Gnostic sense because I think I've come here for a reason. So my different take on that is, although I believe in some of the Gnostic things and the Rosicrucian things, I don't believe I'm trapped here. I believe I've come here to keep an eye on the place because, as I said earlier, with the sympathetic magic, if they screw this place up, they screw the original place up. So I have a kind of different feel on it. Maybe it's just it's like a nicer way of putting the same thing, but it's like, we don't know. We don't know these things, but I think we're here for a reason, and I think to look at it as you're trapped, I find that really just sad. I feel like I'm here to protect this place because it'll have an effect on maybe another place. And that's just a concept I'm working on at the moment, which is the simulation entanglement theory, which I call it. And if this place is connected to that place, because as you say, looks like, sounds like, then whatever this changes into, that has an effect on the original. So that's something I'm playing around with at the moment. Not saying it's true. I just love thinking this way. It makes the world more, for me, enjoyable and fun. That's why I love superhero comics and stuff like that, because it's just like there's more going on here. I can feel that, and I feel that we've lost that and been trapped or cut off from that. And I know they talk about the pineal gland in the Rosicrucians and how that hasn't been severed, but they don't know why it's not working. And I find that stuff fascinating. So I agree with you. The seat of consciousness has been, they're trying to put a wedge in between us and them. But the sad thing is that they need to use us to create the technology that will cut us off because they have no connection with that. That makes sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. And all the things you're saying go back to some older philosophies. You go back to the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below. That's
Mhm.
exactly what you're speaking of. As it is here in the physical, well, the manifestation of that in the physical comes from a causative force within one of the spiritual realms. So let's try to simplify this a little bit. I'll try and give the Cliff Notes version for people out there to understand the basis of what we can truly understand about this reality, how things really function. And a lot of this has been hidden from mankind for a long time. And our materialist science has taken over. And this is only one vantage point of looking at things. They don't want you to think in philosophical ways or to try to explore ways of thinking that talk about these causative planes or spiritual planes. So we'll start with what we know. We know this physical world, this physical material world in which we live in, and we all experience through our five senses. Well, this, according to the Rosicrucians, is what they call the dense chemical region of the physical material world in which we live. Now, there is a subplane that is part of the physical material world in which we live in that is called the etheric plane. Now, they divide this out by 7 different phases of matter in the Rosicrucian system. We're familiar with the first several of them: solid, liquid, gas, and then more recently they came up with the term plasma for the fourth phase. Well, the Rosicrucians claim there are 3 other phases of matter that exist in what they call the etheric region of this reality. And we have a vehicle, a body that corresponds to this. It's called the etheric body or the etheric double. You may have heard of this before. Well, it interpenetrates your physical body, but it's made up of materials that our material science can't really detect as of yet or understand as of yet because it's of a finer substance. That's the same thing with the etheric. So the first phase of matter that we see that reaches into this etheric phase of reality is plasma. And you'll know if you've looked at any of these things, many world governments and military organizations are experimenting with plasma technology. And there's a reason for that. They want to tap into this etheric portion of reality because manifestation in the physical depends first upon manifestation in the etheric portion of that. So if you could affect something on an etheric level, then it will translate into an effect on a physical level.
And
Now, the
possibly
same,
vice versa as well. That's what I'm
exactly.
saying. Yeah.
It is vice versa. It's as above, so below,
Mm.
as below, so above, as within, so without, as without, so within. This is the old Hermetic principle of correspondence. And this is a true thing. I mean, this is proven through the test of time that we can see these correspondences across the board with all of this. So anyway, so in order to affect the physical, first in the natural manifestation of things, first a change has to be made in the etheric. Now, this etheric sublayer of reality also overlaps and interpenetrates another plane of existence called the astral plane in many of these regards. And the same thing, once again, this is a finer grade of quote unquote matter, for lack of better terminology here, the astral. And man has an astral body as well, an astral vehicle, which is loosely attached into the etheric, and the etheric is attached into the physical. It's of a finer substance. It stays with us. Now, according to many of the occult teachings, at night when you go to sleep, your astral form will separate briefly from your physical form. And some people are able to actually travel and have experiences in their astral body. And sometimes these translate as dreams, and other times not so much, because they say most of the time when this happens while you're sleeping, you won't remember it when you wake up because it doesn't imprint the information on the physical brain. It's only in the astral vehicle you have these experiences. Now, through these different ways of thinking, so far we've explored the topic. We have this physical body we're all familiar with our five senses. Attached to that is a an etheric double, which is made of a finer substance, can experience other things than the physical body can, and can express them physically. And then attached directly to that, we have the astral body. So the etheric body, the etheric double of man, operates as kind of like a conduit between the astral and the physical.
Well, a
Now,
good
this
way of
isn't
putting it, Wayne, to be your emotions. Your
right.
etheric
The
body is almost like your emotions. 'Cause sometimes if I'm anxious, I'll get red blotches on my face and gets, it'll show a
well,
physical thing.
actually, let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's actually, according to the Rosicrucian system, your astral body expresses your
Oh, okay.
emotions. The etheric is that connecting point. It's kind of like the connector between the physical body and the astral body.
Got you.
So then your astral body, this is also called, sometimes in some of the systems, they call this the desire world. The astral world is the desire world. So therefore, your emotions and your feelings and stuff like that are all present in that body. The etheric is sometimes referred to as the vital body. This is wherein like all of the involuntary life forces take place, and the healing factor and stuff like that comes in with this, and the different manifestations of elemental fundamental things that occur on the causative way of looking at things here in the physical happen. It happens through the etheric. Okay, so
Mhm.
the astral is attached to the etheric. The etheric is essentially your bridge to the astral from the physical. Now, also attached to this astral body in a higher plane of existence of finer substance is what they call in the Rosicrucian system the mental plane, or the devacanic plane. And this is the seat of the mind. This is where the mind is. And this is where will comes from. And this is where the reflecting point from spirit, from pure spirit down to physical manifestation occurs. So, this mental plane, the devacanic plane, is the reflector, it's the mirror, wherein it gives you an inverse view of spiritual things. So, this is one way to think about it. So, there's a stepping down process. So, we have these four different bodies that exist within man because we also have this mental body that's attached to the astral, and it's of a finer substance. And you go up these different levels. So we have four different bodies according to the system that we work through. We have this physical body we're all familiar with, the etheric double, the astral body, and the mental body. And this mental body, this point, is the division between spirit and form. Everything above that is a spiritual plane of which human beings have very little understanding. And it's a direct reflection of things in the spiritual. So the highest level in this system is the mental plane. Okay, so we could see that. So causation occurs first from the mental plane. It's also called the archetypal world in
Mhm.
some views. And this is an important idea. So this is where causation starts is at this reflecting point from spirit down to matter, and it works in reverse order from matter up to spirit. So you have our archetypal plane, the mental plane. This is where ideas formulate, and there's different layers of this, and people could do the reading if they want, because there's a world of abstract thought, there's a world of concrete thought, all of
Yep.
these things that are sub layers, much like here in this physical reality we talked about the different phases of matter. Well, there's 7 different phases of matter in each of these planes, and
Mhm.
sometimes these things overlap at the topmost points of one and the bottommost points of others. So this is how it all gets tied up and bound together. So I know it sounds like a little off topic, but we need to lay this basic foundation down for people to understand what it is they're trying to do. So the main takeaway that we want to get from this is things start in the archetypal world. They step down through the desire world, through the manifestation of will applied with your feelings and what it is that you want from this pure ideological standpoint to desire to happen. And it steps down through those different worlds or planes to first hear the etheric portion of the material world. And from this etheric portion, it begins to manifest through the physical conduit. And sometimes what winds up being created from this original ideal is a bit different than the ideal. And we'll look at this, we'll use the allegory of an architect, okay, building a house. So let's think about it that way. So, first, the architect has this picture in his mind of this perfect house that he wants to build. So, what's the first thing he does? He'll draw up a blueprint, a 2-dimensional blueprint, which is a rough approximation of what the original ideal was. So, he draws up this blueprint, and lo and behold, he finds that some of the things that he had visualized and pictured in the original ideal are not feasible to put together in the real physical world on the blueprint. So, he has to make changes and modifications on the blueprint. So the next phase of this would be, okay, I have the blueprint. Here's this rough approximation. So now we're going to build a 3-dimensional model of this house. So he builds a small scale model of this house. And lo and behold, he finds that certain things don't align how they're supposed to. And it doesn't look how he originally intended. So he has to make some changes to the house to make it work in real physicality. So he does that. And then the final step is actually building the house from the materials we have, the actual house. So, once again, through the planning phases and through the implementation of it here in the real world setting where you build a house, he winds up having to make more changes to make it work and make it fit because of the land he's building it on gives some limitations. So he has to change the design up a little bit. So the original ideal, the archetype, is different than what the actual physical manifestation of it is, but it's the same foundation, you see.
Mhm.
And this is how this manifestation into reality works. It starts as an archetype, steps down through the feelings and through the modeling process, through the astral, and then it goes into the final modeling phases of the etheric before it can actually be physically built into something or materialize into something in the physical. And it will look different than what the original ideal was. Now, this ideal is the archetypal world, and this is the true nature of reality, according to the Gnostics and the mystics and the Rosicrucians and all of these other groups. The archetypal world, the model, the original image of this in its purity is the true world, whereas this is a reflection of that and a poor quality one because it steps down
Yep.
through these phases into physicality. So I hope this makes sense, and it's important that we lay down this groundwork before we speak to consciousness itself. So, what do you have to add there, Richard? I just went on at length here for a long time talking.
Well, no, you need to, and I've just learned learned a load of things, and it clears it up. So another kind of in my mind, I have to picture things. So if you take a pen, take a felt tip pen, and then draw lightly a line down, but then apply more pressure as you get to the bottom of the line, that would give you a good indication of what we're talking about. That would become thicker and more dense as it gets to the bottom. The colors become more solidified, but and less fine. Um, So that's just an example. One thing you were talking about there, the blueprint there, what I find fascinating, and if you guys don't think these guys think this way, this is an example of them thinking this way. 9/11 changed the world. Well, it changed their perception of the world. It moved us over IXXI, it's the signal of Saturn, Twin Towers, Yakin and Boaz came down, Solomon's Temple, went into the new world. What a lot of people don't know is on the day of 9/11, Jay-Z released his album, The Blueprint, and the blueprint is from Rockefeller Records. These people know this stuff. They live by this stuff. And again, as Wayne says many times, and I say, whether we believe it or not is not the point. This is the system of what they're working on, and we want to uncover their system. Therefore, we can see what they're going to do next, which we pretty much can now. I mean, it's out in the open now what they're going for, and the temple and all this stuff. So to back up what Wayne's saying there, they're giving you the symbology of things like albums out. They'll give you it in records out and films coming out. They'll tell you that these ideas have come down from there, but they aren't. I don't think that some of these guys that maybe are at the top, the blue bloods and these guys have that creative spark, but they know how to manipulate it. And then you get into the so I see it symbolically in the archons who can only take something and manipulate it. And I'm not saying archons exist. I'm saying the principle is that they can't create anything; they can manipulate it. I think that's the important message there. And we always have the underlining message, whether you give a character a name or a set of beliefs like Gnosticism will have the characters within that. It's actually all the same thing. They're telling you the same thing. Kabbalah's telling you the same thing. My understanding now is that what we do down here affects up there. And I think they know that. And they're trying to cut off this place. Now, I think David Icke says, who I work with quite a lot, he believes that the astral world is still within the simulation. I'm not saying it's a simulation. I know you don't believe in that kind of the understanding of that or the terminology of that word, but I'm just using terminology that most people will be familiar with. So he sees that astral world that you were talking about still within. And I think what you were saying there, you'd kind of agree with him that you're still within that body, the astral body is still within underneath the mental plane. So they kind of are agreeing with each other. We're just using different terminology. And I think the real important thing is that actually there is a common language we're all speaking here. We're just saying it in different ways. But actually, we are all saying pretty much the same thing. And I think that's the important thing to get from these podcasts and these things that we do. There's a truth here at our core that we all go ding, ding, ding when we hear it, but we might hear different words and different symbols and different names and different systems that put us off and fight amongst each other. Over actually, we do agree, but we're disagreeing about how we agree. And it's like, it's the
Right.
same bloody thing. And I find that every time I read it, I'm like, that's the same thing as that. And this is what conspiracy researchers or any researchers, it's pattern recognition. The patterns are the same. It's lighter up there, and that's where the original ideas come from, the archetypal ideas come from, the concepts come from. They come down here into the physical plane and we live them out, and they're not the same. Now, what we're talking about today is that they're trying to hijack the seat of consciousness. They're trying to, I think, back engineer by putting ideas from here back into the original consciousness seat to change the nature of the way that original mind thinks. It's almost like a virus invading.
Right. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a distinction here from what my exploration of these topics has shown me through years of study. Now, what you're saying is fundamentally correct in the degree that they're not going to change the archetypal world. This is the important concept here that needs to be understood. This is what they're attempting to do. They're trying to cut humanity off from that
Mhm.
archetypal world. So what they are trying to do is put this system in place where they cut off that barrier between the astral and this mental plane, this archetypal plane. So they're trying to cut that off because they operate from the, well, kind of a sub pocket of the astral plane, if you want to get technical about that. So they operate from this view of the astral. So they want to cut off humanity's connection to source, to God, to the spiritual side of things, to this mental plane. And by doing so, they limit us and they actually trap us in this material plane with that whole ideology. This is what the Gnostics talk about. It's a blueprint. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. That's not actually what has been extant from time immemorial. That is what these inverted spirits want to bring about here. Is that soul trap idea, that man being trapped in physicality, dividing us from that divine source, from that divine spark. That is essentially what they're attempting to do. So they're trying to use technologies to build this system where they create this artificial, this synthetic, etheric portion of this reality. And this synthetic, etheric portion, they themselves, these spirits behind all of this, can influence from this little sub pocket of the astral that they're in that is disconnected from the archetypal plane. And therefore, in so doing, they become essentially the gods of the new physical world they're trying to build. And here's the problem: a lot of the spirits involved with this, they do lack this imaginative spark that humanity has, this divine spark. So they can only imitate what's already here. So they need us to build the technologies and to flood this whole internet system, this whole digital realm with all of the ideas and all of the concepts that humanity has brought to the table in the physical so far. So that's what they're attempting to build. That's why they're all about data collection. That's how they're going to attempt to do new things based upon what humanity has already learned and has known. And they're trying to encapsulate all knowledge into this digital world, this digital sublayer that they're building, these Web3 technologies. That's why they've digitized many of these old books that we have now. And although it's been useful for researchers for like us, this is all about capturing all of the information, feeding it into this artificial intelligence subsystem they're building, this beast system, so that it has access to all of this knowledge. And it can limit the knowledge that it gives to each individual node within the digital system. And each node would be a person, for lack of better terms, here when you get to actually tying the people into the system here. So this is what they're attempting to build. And we've spoken about this before. It's called the world of shells to the
Mhm.
Hermeticists. That's what they're attempting to build. It's devoid of spirit. It's devoid of this divine spark. It's devoid of this connection back to God or to source or to this connecting point at the mental plane, the archetypal plane, which is where we have access to the spirit on the other side of that, and those three planes above that, that sit above that. And this is what they're attempting to do. So they're trying to cut that off and become the new gods, the new source for this new world order that they fully intend to build. So this is what we're looking at. And I think we've spoken pretty long here about the foundations of this, how you have to understand this ideology, this philosophy, in order to make sense of what they're doing. So that's the starting point. And now we could probably focus more on the specific nature of consciousness itself and how it relates to humanity and how this is also attached to these different planes or layers of existence. So, what do you have to say, Richard?
No, it's a good place to sort of, and I'd say cut it off. Sounds like a pun because I see it as almost like the umbilical cord separating us from the original source. There is an element of that, and you can find the patterns, as you say, holographic patterns in everything that we do. So let's take that from there then. So we've kind of been cut off there. You say your take on it is that this is about to happen. The Gnostics would say that's already happened. There's the difference there in what you're saying, and either way, I find it all fascinating. So we're at that point now where they want to cut us off, or whatever you see us as, or whoever becomes human, if we're trapped in this loop or samsara, or whatever you think of it, from the original consciousness beyond mind. And what is consciousness then? If it's one big question is why would it allow that to happen? I think that's the big question that a lot of people have, because it's everything would come underneath it. So why? And I don't know if anyone could ever answer that. But the consciousness part of it, let's talk about that on your concept of what consciousness is outside the kind of Rosicrucian levels and steps up beyond mind.
All right. Well, we have to make a couple important distinctions here. Now, we laid down some of the foundation. I gave the Cliff Notes version as best I could here for people to understand. This is not something you could really come to terms or grips with by just listening to an hour long podcast and to have full understanding of just how much of this has been hijacked and what exactly is the nature of all of it. So, certainly, you do have to ask the question, well, why would they want to do that, to cut us off from this conscious source? Well, it's because they themselves want to be the gods of this place, these spiritual entities that reside in this type of sub realm within the astral, and they people that work beneath them here in this world, they want to be the gods of this place. They want to have ultimate power over everything, and they think they can do that. So that's why they're looking to do that, but they don't realize that they are doomed to fail miserably because of natural laws and because of the very nature of consciousness itself. And consciousness is everything. You see, you cannot have any type of physical manifestation without consciousness. You can't have any type of manifestation of anything without consciousness. God is what you might call the prime consciousness that permeates everything and from which everything derives. So if you cut that off, you are really building a world of shells, a world of dead entities. There's nothing to it. There's no animus, no life force behind it. So that's when you get looking at things that we've been presented in entertainment, the notion of machines taking over, Terminator, all of these different ideas put out there on film for us. It's the robots, the robot revolution, this kind of thing, artificial intelligence. It has no divine spark behind it. It has no life within it. It is, by definition, a dead entity, and it has no real good path forward in this world, but it is what they want to build because they think they could control that and be the gods of it and somehow preserve their own spiritual or mental faculties in this system. And it's not going to work. It's destined to fail miserably, as evidenced in stories like the story of the Tower of Babel. Now that I've laid down that foundation there, let's talk about the seed of consciousness and what is this. So we have these different planes of existence. We've acknowledged them. Man has bodies or vehicles of expression through each of these planes, right? So you still with me, Richard? We following
Yep.
along here?
Yep.
Okay. So within the body of man, according to the Rosicrucians and to the Theosophists and to the Freemasons and various other fraternities, a lot of these different occult systems, and you may find these things described in slightly different terms, but it all describes the same thing. Now, they say that anybody who has developed some of these clairvoyant abilities, they can see these different vehicles expressed in man. It's called the aura. Now, you can see within the aura of man, you can see the etheric double, which expresses just maybe like an eighth of an inch to like an inch and an eighth of from the body, from the physical body, and you can see different colors and stuff shifting in this. So this would be the etheric vehicle, and then beyond that, you could see almost an egg-shaped vehicle that is the astral, and then beyond that, you could see a very hazy look at what you might call the mental body of man. So, according to the clairvoyance of these systems, they could see that. They could see these auras within people when they're using this clairvoyant sight. Now, along with that, when they use this clairvoyant sight to look at the various bodies of man, there's a central point, a black dot or a black point that sits at what they call the root of the nose in the physical that corresponds to the pineal gland in man within the pituitary body. This black spot interpenetrates all of these different vehicles. It sits in the same place within the physical, within the etheric, within the astral, and within the mental body of man. And they can't see within it. This is what they call the seat of consciousness, or the seat of the soul. This is the I am within man. This is the ontological self which resides. This is the ego. They use the word ego in some of these systems. This is where it sits. It's the seat of individuation, and it is impenetrable according to natural laws. This is inviolable according to natural laws. They cannot violate this. This is something that many dark magicians have attempted to actually gain access to, and that's what these technologies are attempting to gain access to. It is the ontological self, the seat of individuation, the seat of consciousness within man. And it is at this point, it corresponds physically with the pineal gland. Now, they've done some things in the modern era to stifle the development of the pineal gland in people, to calcify it and make it non-responsive, because this is the physical organ of man from which this second sight and stuff like that can imprint to, and this expression to accessing some of these spiritual worlds. This is the central point wherein you can do that. So what has happened is they have damaged this pineal gland in the vast majority of the population through things like fluoridation and through vaccines and medicines and food additives and all kinds of different things. The pineal gland has largely been calcified and damaged within most of humanity. Now, any occultist will tell you that the pineal gland, this is your third eye, and this is what allows you to maybe have some mystical experiences and things like that. So this is wherein the seat of consciousness sits. Now, what has happened that I really find compelling, I've just done a couple weeks ago a podcast episode about this on the Alchemical Tech Revolution. Have you heard of something called the telepathy tapes, Richard?
No, I haven't. No.
It's a podcast series that was put out by a lady named Kai Dickens, where she actually found families of severely autistic children who were nonverbal, who were able to begin to communicate through facilitated communication using a keyboard and stuff like that. And the things they were telling were almost telepathic. They were able to make predictions and see things happening that they should have no way of doing. They claimed to be able to read the thoughts of their caretakers and parents and stuff like that. And they were able to perform some interesting things and give interesting details about things that they should by no means be able to do.
Wow.
And it's a fascinating podcast series. So essentially, what was being revealed in this podcast series, which by the way got a lot of mainstream attention, and she actually appeared on Joe Rogan and stuff like that, but has gotten a lot of major backlash against, because there's a lot of people saying that this is all just bad for the people affected on the autism spectrum, and then it's all pseudoscience and it's all nonsense and stuff. But what she's being described by these autistic nonverbal people aligns perfectly with some of the things that we were just talking about. So it appears that they were able to, in another room, like some of the experiments they did, like in another room, there would be somebody holding up a card and showing it to one of their caretakers, and they would use the keyboard in the other room to type what the number on the card and stuff was, and they were doing it with a startling amount of accuracy. Like they should have no way of knowing this.
Hmm.
Well, what this tells me, and the way I offered some analysis to this, is that it would appear what's happened is that their etheric form has been jarred from their physical form. And it has been expressed by those in the Rosicrucian circles and people like Rudolf Steiner as well, that it is possible that some type of physical trauma can actually loosen the etheric body within the physical. And in this loosened condition, what happens is correspondingly, if the etheric form is loosened from the physical form and in waking consciousness, it separates slightly from that, the astral form separates from it too. And that astral form can give you perceptions of things around you. The astral form can travel away and perceive things that the physical form cannot perceive. And they could do this during waking consciousness. So this is what seems to be going on with that whole notion. And this leads to a lot of different studies in consciousness in the scientific research community. And they're not comfortable approaching these ideas because it doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't fit in their neat little box that our modern scientism has tried to put us in. So this seems to be what's happening is for some reason or another, they acknowledge a traumatic event can loosen this etheric form from the physical form and therefore begin to manifest as certain types of clairvoyant abilities within primarily initiates in the system. This is why they have done traumatic initiation rituals in the past in many of these secret society groups and stuff. It's in an attempt to create this physical trauma that loosens the etheric form within the physical form. So, what can cause this? Well, vaccines can cause physical trauma and damage to the body, especially portions of the brain like the pineal gland and the pituitary body. And in so doing, it seems feasible that this could happen. And maybe, just maybe, this is one of the reasons why we see some of these types of symptoms in people where they have problems controlling their body. They become nonverbal, can't control their seat of speech and stuff like that in the physical. But according to what's been proffered by these telepathy tapes podcasts, is that these people do have very intelligent and capable spirits to them where they want to communicate. They just have trouble communicating in the physical or using their physical body, but they do have agency of themselves. They are not how they're described in much of the medical literature. They're not incapable. They do have feelings and executive function, but they do it in a different level. They
Mm.
have it in a different phase of reality, a different plane of reality. So it's a fascinating series, and I would recommend listen to it because this is at the cutting edge of what it is people need to understand in modern reality here. It's on the fringes of science right now. And this lady has gotten an awful lot of backlash from people claiming she's giving some of these families of these autistic people false hopes and that this is all pseudoscience and it's all nonsense and it's all very harmful. And I don't think that's the case. It seems like there's a lot of probability she's actually recording real phenomena happening and they don't understand it. And in order to understand it, you have to understand what it is we're talking about here today. So essentially, what's been done is they're trying to access this seat of consciousness, this seat of individuation, this black point observable by the clairvoyance. They want access to that, the ontological self, the I am within man. They want to violate that, and that's what they're attempting to do in so many of the experiments that they're pulling off on humanity, and they're trying to do that through traumatic physical events to physically traumatize the biology of people, the physiology of people, to loosen that etheric form so that they could try to hijack that process of manifestation. And I know this sounds like a lot, and some people will say that's absolute nonsense and hokum. You're entitled to your opinion on that. I'm just telling you what it is that I've observed from my knowledge of all the occult sciences combined with the things they're doing today and what the evidence really and the preponderance of evidence points to. And it points to the possibility they're trying to hijack this seat of consciousness. Now, what does that look like, the seat of individuation? Well, they're trying to knock loose the etheric and therefore the astral form from the physical. Well, this would create a void within the physical body wherein something else can step in. And that's the whole point. That's what I think they're
Mm.
trying to attempt to do. And we do see a lot of experimentation going on some of these more vulnerable populations like the autistic population. And that's something I've I've noticed and I've recorded in many of my past books and podcasts and everything else. This seems to be a group they've experimented on heavily. And so I want to hear your take on all of this, Richard. I know I just said an awful lot of things there.
I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. I have a nephew who's autistic, and I know that you have autistic children yourselves. It's something that's very close to our hearts here, and I mean, it doesn't take a much to see that people like Elon Musk are autistic, and I mean, he talks about it himself on the spectrum. Greta Thunberg, clearly, that to me would be something like Grok. When we're looking at Grok and the logo of Grok, it looks like Saturn and a black hole. That would make sense from what you're saying. The black hole, what we're looking at, is not. I mean, it could mean many things. I'm sure it
That's right.
does, but it could be the black
Perfect
hole.
symbology. Yep, that's
Perfect
the seed of
symbology there.
individuation. Yep, and that's what it
Exactly.
is exactly. And most people don't want to see it. And yes, it's also the macrocosm as well. It's also
Mm,
the symbol of Saturn and maybe a black hole in the sky as a certain reference point. It's the correspondence. You see, it's the
yeah.
Hermetic principle of correspondence. Again, you could read many levels of meaning to these symbols, and that is one of the levels of meaning. It is the representation of the ontological self, the seat of individuation, the seat of the soul that sits at the root of the nose, as they like to call it here. And remember all the COVID testing, where were they pushing that swab?
Well,
There's a
exactly. Yeah.
reason. There's a reason for that too.
There was a part of the Gilgamesh story, and I should know this because I've just put it in a film. But Gilgamesh, he was looking for immortality, and he lost something in terms of that, and it was almost like he became like a shell, and something else could step into it. And I'll have to look up what that is because he was connected in with Prometheus. And if you have a look at the Gilgamesh story, and it looks like he gets disconnected, and I think that's. And then you look at who Gilgamesh was, and obviously he's the prototype of Noah. Gilgamesh disconnected can refer to either a psychological phenomenon called the Gilgamesh effect, where thoughts of human disconnection reduce ethical behavior, or technical issues with a video game and Final Fantasy. They always tell you in computer games, don't they? So, definition: a psychological phenomenon where thinking about human disconnection decreases ethical decisions making. So, you become disconnected. That's like sociopathy. There is a something about his story where he disconnects and something it leaves open the being to something else to step in. And that would go back into the Noahide laws because Gilgamesh is clearly the flood of Gilgamesh is clearly the flood of Noah. And I think that if I could pinpoint what that is, the connections are there. They all start to come together. That there's an other type of being that these. That's why I think we've seen such a flood of autism, especially in young boys, because they've been experimenting on humans
Exactly.
for a very long
Exactly.
time, and I completely believe that, and that's what these guys are, and as you say, they're kind of out of phase was the term that you used, which I thought was brilliant. They're out of phase with the body. They're in a different slightly different phase, not different dimension, but a slightly different phase. They're here, but they're not here. It's like they're half in world, but they're not. And they can see things that are in another phase, and phase is the best way to put it. It's an olive skin. It's slightly off kilter. And that's where they are to varying degrees as well. And someone like Elon Musk, I would believe he was a result of an experimentation in that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's definitely possible. Now, here's the other interesting connection here with this. Now, the Rosicrucians also teach that not every animal that this spot, this seat of individuation sits in the same place. It doesn't perfectly correspond with the physical body in all animals. Like, for instance, they will tell you the horse that this black dot sits slightly above their head outside of their physical body. And this is also one of the reasons why they explain why animals seem to be able to sense things humans can't, because their seat of consciousness sits just slightly outside their physical body. And this is a different way of thinking for most people, but that's the whole point here is if this seat of consciousness is misaligned with the physical body, well, that offers you different types of sensations or sensory experiences, super sensory experiences that reach outside of our physical five senses. And this is what's being described in the telepathy tapes when you go back and you listen to that. And I would highly recommend people go listen to that. It's only just within the past couple months I listened to it. I had a lot of my own listeners request that I do an analysis of this for them and give my take on what's going on. Because some of the things that are revealed in the telepathy tapes are very interesting and important to the nature of consciousness and the study of consciousness. So there's a lot there to go over. And also, another facet of the telepathy tapes that I really found compelling and which really does align with the secret school teachings about this is that also she had interviewed several different autistic nonverbal people in different areas of the country, and they all, without prompting, told her some of the same things. And the interesting thing they told her was that they had friends that they were able to communicate with and have a good time with and meet with out of body at a place they called the Hill, and they all referred to it as the Hill, where they meet and they know each other. And this is almost like a form of astral travel. So this once again applies the same ideal from the Rosicrucian teachings and stuff here. So this is what I found compelling, and which led me to really think from analyzing it that this is what's going on, that their etheric form has been misaligned from their physical form and has offered them these different perceptive abilities and powers. So many of these autistic people, nonverbal ones, through the facilitated communication, had communicated that they sometimes, that while they were laying in their bed or whatever, they would go to this place they called the Hill and meet with their friends, and they would be able to communicate and have a good time and had relationships with these people, some of which they didn't really know, or they weren't anywhere within physical proximity, but they all claimed to know each other, and they all claimed to be friends, and they met at this place. And this falls back to some of the older occultic teachings too, where you have these different meetings that occur between initiates in many of these different schools of thought. And this goes back. You there?
Yep, I'm
My
there. Yeah,
my
carry on.
my screen cut off for a second. That was weird.
Yeah, you're back now, but you're frozen, but you're back. I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but your video's frozen for a second. But it came back again then.
Okay, that was weird. My screen just totally cut out. I'm sorry. Are we coming through now?
Yeah,
Okay.
you are audio wise, video wise.
Looks
You're.
like connection.
Mm. There you are. There you go. You're back.
Okay.
That was weird.
I think we're talking about stuff that somebody out there doesn't want us talking about. But at any rate, so you can go back, and in much of the Eastern traditions of esotericism, you'll find this where yogis are able to leave their body and meet somewhere in the astral with their students and stuff like this. And even the Rosicrucians, if you go back to the Fama, the original Rosicrucian manuscript that came out in the 1600s, they talked about this, how once a year that the Rosicrucians would meet, the initiates would meet on the astral plane at a certain landmark, and it was usually a mountain where they met. So this gives a correspondence here from this autistic population saying they meet on the hill. Same kind of a notion going on here. So the archetype is present in all of it, and it certainly fits the description given by the secret schools as to some of these super sensible worlds, these spiritual realms all around us, through which man's various vehicles and bodies can express in certain ways. And you could see how the potential or the possibility of them creating some type of a physical trauma or disease state or harm of some sort can misalign this etheric form. And this is all part of their overall operation to cut mankind off from anything spiritual and trap him here, and to also create a vehicle of expression for themselves in the physical world, these spiritual beings that exist in this sort of subplane of the astral, as I tried to describe it. Now, many have described this as hell, and that's essentially where it is that these spirits exist, is hell. It's a type of consciousness itself of sorts that's a painful type of thing because they have no means of actual expression where they're at. So they have to reach across the bounds and try to attach themselves to living beings or some such thing in order to do that. And that's wherein we're seeing this. And I know this is likely a bridge too far for a lot of people in their thinking, but this is the nature of what's going on. It really is. And it's not a comfortable topic to broach with most people, but I think it's important that we put it out there, Richard.
I think it is too. It absolutely is, and to get people even to thinking along this line. So the solar symbol, we'll just bung this in at the end there. Solar symbol is the circle with the dots for the solar mass. Also, that reminds me straight of when uh, what is his name? Cain was banished, and there was no central sun, so he was in chaos because he had nothing, no fixed center there. I think that's symbolic in that, and also um, another kind of symbol for that is X as well for the solar sun mass. So you can see it all there, what they're actually talking about and going to. So it opens up a new world of an avenue, and maybe next one we can get into thinking about what would happen to the human soul or the human connection if it was no longer able to get into this reality. Like they're trying to
Right.
cut it
And
off.
we're
It's interesting.
and at some point we're going to have to talk about the notion of the black star as well. And this is an interesting concept that relates to all of this. And I don't know if I should be talking about that publicly on air, but at some point we're going to have to broach the subject because it is really what's going on. So that relates to this what happens to human consciousness, what happens to the human body, the human vehicle, when and if they're able to completely separate out the archetypal world from the expression here in the physical. What exactly happens and what does that look like? And do we have warning signs of that coming? And I think we most certainly do, but that'll be a topic and a discussion for another day here, Richard.
It will be, but maybe next time because I think that's somewhere. If we get that's where the information's taking us, I think we need to be brave enough to go that route. Right. So, people, can they find your work? Where can they find you and connect with everything you're doing? This has been another fascinating. This is why it takes us 2.5 weeks sometimes to get together. We've obviously got busy families running around, creating other content constantly. So, where can they find that other content to keep them all satiated while they wait for the next one?
All right. I could be found at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. Where could the good people find you, Richard?
Video content, iconic.com, and Substack. You can find me at Some May Conspire, or just put richard.willett in and you'll find me there. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Please leave your comments below, share this, and subscribe. Thank you for all your support with this fascinating series. I mean, as we're learning and we're moving forward in our own research, and you guys are with us. So it's a fascinating journey. Thank you.